Welcome to today's webinar, hosted by Athletic Business and sponsored by Biamp. I'm Andy Berg, Executive Editor at AB. Before we get started, I just wanted to note that we invite all attendees to participate in today's discussion. You can enter questions in the control panel at any time throughout today's conversation, and we'll get to as many of them as possible in the time allotted. With that said, let's jump right in. As most of you already know, quality audio is key to energizing crowds and athletes at sports venues. Getting there is the hard part, but there's reason for hope. Today, presenters Todd Stevens, Director of Loudspeaker Sales for the Americas at Biamp, and Dave Howden, Technical Service Manager, Loudspeaker Solutions Group, are going to take us through best practices in assessing and improving audio quality in indoor and outdoor sports environments. Today, we're going to touch on how to assess your current audio system and the steps you can take to achieve a rich, clear audio at all your events or add a completely new system. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, why don't you take it away and just kind of give us a little idea of what you guys do, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Andy. Well, again, my name's Todd Stevens. I oversee the loudspeaker business for the Americas. I've been worrying about speakers for prior life community loudspeakers. We were adopted by Biamp some 5 years ago. So I've been worrying about this stuff for about 10, 11 years directly with the company. I was a field rep for a while, and then I joined Community Loudspeakers about 6 years ago now, and then we were acquired. So just been doing what I love for a little while now. And then Dave, why don't you give us a brief history on you that's a lot longer than mine.
Thanks, Todd. So yeah, my name's Dave Howden. I'm Technical Services Manager of the Loudspeaker Solutions Group, and we're the customer-facing arm of Biamp when it comes to applications for loudspeakers in, any venue larger than a conference room, if you will. I've been working in this same office for coming up on 26 years now. So, kind of been there, done that, seen that as far as applications, both in the Americas and globally with our loudspeaker systems. And I also draw on my experiences from, some of my moonlight ad. I actually operate sound in a handful of professional sports facilities here in Philadelphia, and probably run sound for 1,1600 sporting events of any note you can imagine. So I draw on that a lot when I'm thinking of, a customer comes to us, says, yeah, I need a new sound system. I draw on a lot of those experiences, and scale them obviously as needed to help them create the environment that they want to.
Very good. Well, speaking of that environment, let's go fire away here and kind of walk through ideas that we like to discuss when we're looking at a system for the first time. You, the customer, would come to us or a qualified integrator and say you need a system. So there's certain things we like to walk through with that. So let's go ahead and dive into some high level subject matter in this. We don't want to get too much into the weeds of technical, spec sheets and propeller heads here. We're happy to answer any question you want, but let's go through some high level stuff that kind of applies to many sports systems that we encounter. So Biamp has been doing audio for quite a while. Both Biamp and Community before that, over 50 years experience in AV. So we've been at it for a while. We love doing indoor and outdoor, and we excel in the outdoor space, but we love indoor of any manner size. So like Dave said, anything bigger than a conference room, we worry about on the loudspeaker side. I'll worry about a conference room if it needs to be addressed from our loudspeaker perspective. So what we're going to do today is kind of talk about those spaces that you're interested in, how to take a listen to your space, how to walk it and kind of take a critical ear into the room, what to look for in your facility, what to listen for, how do you need to become the audience as opposed to maybe just the athletic director or a coach or something on the sidelines. It's important to empathize with your audience. And if you're we're realizing you need a new system, let's figure out how you want to make it better. What's the ideal experience you want to look at or develop for your audience? And of course, budget comes in, so we have to. What I do is always start at the best. We might have to look at better, and then we might have to look at good. Based upon the needs, the budgets are often part of that equation. We'll look at some products, how we apply those, the typical ones we use in a lot of these sports facilities. And then if you're in the situation of needing a system, where do you start? Maybe you don't have an integrator, a contractor, someone ready to call for your AV needs. So we help with the design work, but we also help connect the dots in terms of getting the systems done if you need such assistance. So again, 50 years of worrying about audio. Biamp started as making amps and mixers. So now it's a full AV firm doing everything under the sun, from airports down to a conference room, meeting rooms, huddle rooms, auditoria, you name it. And community really started with focusing on intelligibility. So pretty much everything we do comes down to intelligible audio, no matter the environment. And we've done that for a long time. We've established good trust in the industry. So we like to continue that and be honest in our specifications and the way our systems are going to perform out there. We're not afraid to say we don't have a product. We don't want to misapply our speakers. So we're not going to force the issue. We want to pick the right product for the job, and we'll help guide, even if it unfortunately isn't one of our speakers. It's all application driven. In the end, we want to make speakers that get through to your audience in whatever scenario you might be experiencing. And we're here for you. We love taking calls from end users, our integrator partners out there, a fan that went to an experience and wants us to come up with a new solution, you name it. So we're going to talk about some common spaces, right? Your basketball courts, your football fields. And while the surfaces might have similar dimensions, pretty much everything else about those systems can differ wildly. So, we don't do cookie cutter systems. Yes, we have templates that kind of work for most scenarios, and we're confident that these things are going to work. We'll take a look at some basic designs that will lead you in the right direction. But in the end, we like to take a look at a lot of the data and the aspects of the room that will change just putting sound on a court, as it were. So you got a need for a system, something's not working, but what do you do? So by active listening, I mean walking through the space. This is a site survey. Let's go listen, like I said before, as an audience member. So walking the room, touching every seat in the bleachers, even understanding what the room is doing to sound. Why is it that no one can understand the speakers, or it's not loud enough to get over the noise of the environment? You can do things like, clap your hands in the room, right? So there's ways to kind of get us the information without being a science geek and trying to measure the room acoustically. But we'd like to know, hey, what works? What do you like about your system? What doesn't work? Why are you trying to improve it? Give us some history kind of thing. And to the intelligibility side, understanding the voice. We want to make sure that's coming through, because with any performance, games included, if you can't understand the message, then your audience is left in the dark. We like to look at things like operator interface. Does this want to be like a simple system? Do you want to be able to push a button and everything just happens miraculously, depending on the type of event, as in maybe you use that basketball court for assembly, and maybe your operators in the house aren't necessarily operators. So you have to simplify the user interface. So we want to kind of talk through that. We have lots of solutions upstream from our loudspeakers and amps that do provide solutions for how are people going to use this system and make it easy for them to use the system. Dave, let's get you to talk for a little bit.
Okay, and I will just follow on to Todd's comment there. I mean, we usually, in most facilities, K to 12, okay, we get to collegiate level, we may have experienced operators, but we don't want to drop, or I should say, it usually isn't wise to drop something with, 50 knobs and buttons on it, down and, when they're only running a microphone and, possibly an iPad or something to play, to play some background music. So the human interface and the ability for a wide range of staff to operate the system, whether you want a touchpad on the wall and the easy button and just a simple knob, make it louder, make it quieter. These are considerations that you should certainly have, because we could design a Ferrari of a sound system, but if the human interface side of it isn't simple for your day-to-day operators to use, it could be all for naught. So in these spaces, Todd mentioned, voice is important. Yeah, and that is, and we're dealing with physics here. We don't want you to have to deal with the physics. We'll help guide you through, the physics of sound, because we're, sound is what happens when you push air, and there's ways that we can control, how loud the sound is, how wide the bandwidth is. Do you just need, voice bandwidth, or do you want music reproduction, or do you want that visceral feel in your facility, whether it's indoors or outdoors? It's all physics, and we are governed by a bunch of laws which don't really bend. It works or it doesn't, and that's why we really do have to consider the room acoustics so that we can choose the appropriate speaker technology to go into that space. Yes, number one is generally voice. Without clear voice, the boom and sizzle don't matter too much, especially if you're in higher ed or in public facilities. And boy, maybe you've even sold advertising, in these spaces, advertising spots, whether it be supported by video or if it's voice only. If you can't understand the voice, you're probably not going to get a renewal from that advertiser. So we need to consider the room. And the first thing we look for, one of the first things we request, in the applications group, when somebody says, yeah, I've got this facility and I want to improve the sound. Okay, first let's figure out, what it probably sounds like now. Now, it's possible you could just describe it, but we're going to want to look at pictures and see, is there anything absorptive in that space that gives us some clue that of when sound leaves a loudspeaker, how long does it hang around? This is commonly known as the reverb time of the space. And we're always looking at the ceilings, see, okay, what is the ceiling, in this space? Is it that what kind of looks like pressed spaghetti stuff, which is an absorptive material, or is it some sort of batting, or is it just a steel metal deck? We'll look at the walls. Yeah, more often than not, they're probably gonna be concrete block or similar material. But we're gonna look: are there any of those 2x2 or 4x8 squares of absorption on the block, mounted to it? This will give us, these things will start giving us, a very good clue as to which speaker technology is going to be appropriate for the space to achieve good speech intelligibility. Music's pretty easy. If you're just playing music in a space, and I mean just music, there's a lot more you can get away with, as long as you can, understand the beat and hear the boom and the sizzle, and it's just for practice for the whichever athletic team it might be. Great. It goes for, weight rooms. We don't care too much about, the weight rooms. They're smaller spaces. Distribute speakers around. Let's try not to, have them too low over people's heads and trying to project 40 feet so that it's uncomfortable for people near them and not loud enough for people far away. These are all things we're looking at. The ambient noise, that's key. Do you have a noisy air conditioning system? For outdoors, is our sports field next to a highway or a 4 or 6 lane road? These again are things that are going to guide us towards the appropriate solution. The hand clap and speech test. If you clap your hands, does it just flutter back and forth, forever? Or can we maybe stand somebody, 20 feet, 30 feet away from us. Go up into the bleachers 2/3 of the way, and I'm going to stand here at the sideline and I'm going to read something. And can they understand me at 20 feet away or 30 feet away with non-familiar, verbiage? Those are things that'll help us, gauge the sound of the space, again, like Todd said, without having to have a PhD in this stuff. And this is likely going to start driving us towards design options once we see some CAD prints and some pictures, because we need to know where the structure is. Where can we mount speakers? And we need to know limitations from your end, whether they're structural, or architectural or just visual. This is going to start leading us towards, what speaker technology will be appropriate for this indoor or outdoor space. Perhaps it's a well-behaved space, and it's only a 25-foot ceiling room, and we're trying to project sound, or I should say, it's fairly friendly. Maybe there's some acoustic treatment on the ceiling, maybe a little bit on the walls. That's going to guide us towards, okay, can we maybe get away with just placing a cluster of speakers in the middle of a space, which can be a very cost-effective install. But in order to do that, you need a pretty well-behaved acoustic space. If it's not so well behaved, or the distances are great from the middle to your furthest listener, we may then look at what's called a distributed system, where maybe we're placing speakers, an example of say a basketball type setting. We're placing the speakers over the edge of the court, up on the ceiling, obviously, and getting them closer to our listeners, because one of our main goals is to try and give everybody in attendance a very similar listening experience. No matter where they're sitting, and they have direct coverage from speakers. So distributed systems versus center clusters, that's where my group, the loudspeaker applications group, comes in, and me and my team, we can help have those initial discussions based on information that you provide to us to help guide us towards, what an appropriate solution may be, and then we can get you engaged with a Biamp sales channel to take things further, or introduce you to a contractor who's experienced in work in these types of spaces, because they are quite different than just placing small speakers on a wall, or cutting round holes in a ceiling for ceiling speakers. There's a very different set of disciplines that need to be applied in order to have successful outcomes in these spaces.
So Dave, let me stop you there quick. I'm sure there's somebody on this call who's thinking, can I just buy the speakers and set them up myself? But given what you've just said, it does sound like there is a bit of an art and a science to ensuring that you're getting what you paid for in the speakers through the setup.
Yeah, on the science side, I gotta say, yeah, sound is physics, whether we're indoors or outdoors. But well, you can go and buy speakers and put them up, in small installations, and maybe you'll get the outcome you want. But partnering with Biamp to leverage our expertise and our products, and then, as Todd will talk about, how our various sales channels and contractors can help. It behooves you, especially in these, whether it's a natatorium or an auxiliary gym, a baseball, a football field, an ice arena, to work with a contractor and work with people that understand how these spaces behave, so that you're able to, if it's new construction, just have a successful system out of the box, or if it's a renovation, let's address any shortcomings you and your audience may have noticed. Todd, I'm sure you got something to say about this too.
And I've seen plenty of systems that have been done professionally and may have hiccups in it, and plenty of systems that the facility didn't want to afford a contractor. So speakers get put into corners, or just bad decisions on where to put the speakers. And kind of what you said is like, I bought this stuff. Let's get the most out of it and make some decisions as to where to put it. Now, we could easily say, like, that speaker's in the wrong place. It should go over there, but at least have a level of experience to say what's good and not good. And, not only is it, making decisions like, is it a distributed system or a center cluster, but yeah, again, like, what kind of speaker, what's technology? We can talk horn-loaded devices, point source versus line array. There's lots of things that can be influencing our decisions based upon the space. So it behoove you to have a conversation with someone who's had experience in these spaces. But totally get it if you can only, need to go out and buy a music center powered speaker. We just like to take it to another level and say, what are you going to get out of that, and what are you going to give up because you do that? Kind of along those lines. There's lots of good speakers out there. It's hard to find a bad one. We've all heard bad ones. I'm sure you've heard, whether it's a page in Lowe's or at a game, there's bad ones. But even if it's a good speaker, you can make bad decisions about what to do with it. And I've highlighted here, a poll system. Nothing necessarily wrong with doing this kind of system, putting speakers on poles and facing it where you need to. First and foremost, you aim speakers at ears. But the type of speaker here is just, it's standard, we'll call it a point source speaker with a high frequency driver and a low frequency driver. But the problem is, you wrap those around a pole, it's going to be an uneven experience, simply because of all those devices next to each other. But they're not going to be intelligible once you get 20 or 30 feet away from these things in this kind of environment. So here you are spending money to put something on a pole and try to get coverage, but it's just going to fall short for the audience who needs to hear stuff.
Yeah, I mean, small speakers generally go short distances, and looking at this picture, what I hadn't seen before, I see somebody wrap speakers around a pole, probably bought them themselves, but they're all aimed straight out. Nothing's actually aimed at the audience, and it appears that they've got them aimed in a way that they're trying to project 300 plus feet across a field. This is probably a system we replaced. But just because somebody is trying to do the right thing, maybe even the maintenance department bought the stuff from, web store ABC and put them up, but they just didn't quite understand. So we want to help you not make those expensive mistakes with that valuable, donor money, booster money, whatever it may be. Want to help you get it right the first time, or at least this second time around.
Yeah, we did end up putting some R2s into this job, so they loved it. So let's kind of dissect some indoor systems, look at some examples here, and then we'll get to some outdoor systems. But most people here are familiar with this kind of stuff. Gyms, they vary wildly to the acoustic conversations we had. Hockey rinks, those can be even worse than gyms. Obviously, we got a lot of hard surfaces in there, and we've
got glass in the way too of the
yes.
high value seating sections too, generally.
That's right. So talking about where you can put speakers, that becomes a pretty important conversation, so that you can get over that glass or not even worry about the glass in the first place. So lots to consider there. And natatorium, not much different. We've all been in pools that you cannot understand a thing. It's loud just because of the humming of the HVAC. Never mind trying to understand anybody. So tricky situations, but we like to have ideas and listen first. What's going on? What's not working? What do we need to do with it?
In these environments, we also need to understand the use cases, which we touched on briefly earlier. A gymnasium, yes, it might be purely a sports facility. And yes, of course, the people in the bleachers, they need to hear. But maybe it's also a multifunction space. Maybe it's your largest open space and you're going to have banquets, seated banquets. Maybe you do commencement in there also. We'd rather, through our discovery process, we want to know what are all the different ways you're going to use this space so that we can make sure that not only the seating has appropriate coverage, but the playing surface, because it might not always be a playing surface, it's an event surface. And if you rent it out also, then, well, there's even higher expectations that, that the system work right for, for those temporary rentals. hockey, and gyms and hockey rinks, also we have objects flying. We have sports equipment flying through the air. Our speakers, a wide range of them have actually undergone impact testing. On the grills, we're not so worried about the cabinet, the side cabinets, but this is something most manufacturers can't say. We've been so ingrained in the sports, in the sports world for so long. We've taken these extra steps to make sure that volleyballs and basketballs, yeah, they're going to hit a grill, sometimes accidentally, sometimes as an exercise. And okay, let's have target practice. Who's the first person that can hit the speaker? We've gone through great lengths to to address and mitigate those sorts of risks. Natatoriums, natatoriums are actually the toughest environment out there for speakers. And while the acoustics are very tough, and we usually just have to place the speakers close to people, whether the viewing gallery is down on, on pool level, or if it's a deck up above it, we've usually got speakers distributed close to the people, because there's nothing absorptive in natatoriums except the heads bobbing above the waterline typically. And we have the addition of having chlorine air in there, which is the most obnoxious environment you can place any sort of electronics, much less a loudspeaker in. And we have designed to, and we test to international standards for chlorine air and these nasty gaseous environments. So we're not just about getting loud, we're about designing speakers that will survive in these environments also.
That's why we also have pretty long warranties on our outdoor devices. A lot of them are used indoor. So we want to ensure this cabinet's going to last for 15 years. We warrant that. We want to make sure electronics inside of it we warrant it for 5 years. So in thinking about these things, we can stand behind a warranty. So all stuff that's important for the longevity of the system. You'll find resources at biamp.com called design guides. And we have a collection of them for sports facilities. Then we also have one for presentation, auditoria kind of situations, and then for performance venues. What they do is make it really easy to kind of understand what options you may be looking at and the technology and solutions that we often go to for set spaces. So these are a couple of example images from our sports design guide, and we're just looking at a standard basketball court, right? Sometimes you can't put speakers everywhere, or you just need enough to cover and get practice going. So on the left one, we just have pretty general coverage, but if you can see or resolve from that image, there are 3 speakers facing at each stand. To Dave's points, let's get speakers close to each other, close to the audience. Court coverage here is just by 2 speakers in the center facing one end versus the other. You're going to get some intelligibility through that place. But maybe there's a way to do that better so that we're not fighting too much of the acoustic space. So we want to now position more speakers over the court, as you see on the right. Now, it does give us the advantage of eroding any sort of dead spots over that court, because maybe I am using a space for assembly as well. But acoustically speaking, might want to look at downfiring speakers so that I'm not hitting sound right off walls in the voice band. So we make those kind of decisions, or at least help make those decisions, again, attending to physics and then budget. You'll see the picture, the family shot of some of the R series there. We go to for many, many sports applications. They are all about controlling sound. Meanwhile, you can pick your device as to how low it wants to go, and then how far you need to throw the stuff. So often we ask how loud, how far, and how low. So we make devices that will accomplish X distances, X low frequency output, and those kind of things. So Dave, did you want to have any input on this one?
It's just looking at it, as I mentioned, if we're using gym type spaces or large, large and, indoor spaces, for assembly, or as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the goal is really to give all the listeners within the space a very similar experience, which, certainly, helps drive audience engagement if they can understand what's going on. Where the system on the left, as Todd said, just for general coverage, it's purely a sports space. Yeah, sound, aiming up and down the courts. Okay, that's fine, but that wouldn't work out so well if perhaps at the east end, the east end, that's where I have a podium with a microphone addressing, the donor's dinner or something of that sort. Rather than firing sound long ways up and down the gym, causing long echoes, we'd rather have it come down from above on top of them and keep that reflection going up and down rather than side to side in a room, which is much more destructive to speech intelligibility. So that's why we would usually lean towards this enhanced coverage type scenario and use them as glorified ceiling speakers. One of the reasons we might do that. We get more and more requests for subwoofers inside of indoor and outdoor facilities. In these in gym scenarios, basically you've got two options. We can either stick them up on the ceiling steel, generally close to where the full range speakers are, the three of them in front of the bleachers there. Put one or two per side if you want that visceral impact and that, and that sort of experience for your audience, and assuming you've got the budget to. Or sometimes, depending on how far back the bleachers collapse, they could go on the floor, which, again, lower cost of installation as opposed to flying them in the air. There's a few different ways, to do it, but there's a lot more wrong ways to do it, like putting a speaker in each corner of the room. Yeah, you'll cover the room in sound, but you won't be able to understand it. Or in a room that is just pure block walls and no acoustic absorption, let's just put two speakers in the middle aiming at the home side and two aiming at the away side. The chances are that voice clarity is not going to be there.
And then we can do all the smaller spaces, right? Modest to medium, but sometimes we need to step it up. Higher ed is going to have some nice sports facilities, and I'm in Atlanta, and the South cares about some football and basketball. Not that they don't elsewhere, but we will start seeing some larger systems, so we might have to start looking at other technologies. On the left there, we've got a lovely arena. It's at Campbell University down in North Carolina. And that's got 80 or 90 of our IV6 line array boxes going around there. And that has nice coverage. It is very replete. Every seat is the best seat. Every seat is the same as the next one down the way. But we also have to control it acoustically, but that's what that image is at the bottom there. That's showing you the coverage vertically of those speakers. And you can see I'm keeping energy away from the structure, and it's keeping even energy across the audience. We love that. Audience loves that.
And if you're in a facility that does any sort of broadcast, I mean, trust me, the broadcasters appreciate you localizing that sound to the stands also. Working with a lot of broadcast outfits, if you're in a facility of that size, it's important. And there's some sports you don't want to bother the athletes with the direct sound. So having a wide range of speaker technologies to choose from Biamp can help achieve, whatever goals, are defined for the space.
So let's talk some outdoor familiar kind of applications here. Again, R series widely used here. A lot of our design guides are based upon those, but we can use the systems in the previous image there. But in outdoor systems, there are different things we have to start worrying about, and that lead us to conversing about different speaker technologies. But to generally cover these fields, we have a few recommended ways to do it based upon typical infrastructure. So again, in our design guides, you can see a few different options. Maybe you're relegated to using press box. We like press boxes. Light poles Can we mount to them? There's some structural concerns there. There's wind loads, things that we have to start thinking about from almost just a safety perspective. But sometimes we can get nice even coverage if we can get higher. We often and generally do get better coverage if we can get speakers higher. So how tall are those poles, and can they hold stuff, the weights that we need to put up on them? Scoreboard systems, a lot of people like the decision there because the sound is coming from where, you know, the action is visually. So there's reasons to use that, but then we have to start accounting for the out of sync issue with an announcer who's in the press box, and now my voice is coming to me, you know, 60, 100 milliseconds later. That can be a problem for people not used to it. Maybe they need additional monitors in the press box. Maybe they can't though. Anyway, there's reasons we go one way or the other, and we have different loudspeakers to address either one of these kind of situations.
If you take a look around the country and notice you'll probably see a very large percentage of athletic fields are covered by our R series systems, and these are the three main configurations here. And I mean, whether it's a football field, rugby, lacrosse, they're all kind of similar in size. We usually have an announcer's box get up above the seating. So the easiest structure to mount to is usually put them on the press box. I mean, we got to work with our mechanical engineers and our professional engineers to make sure they're mounted in an appropriate way. They'll handle the expected winds for your particular area of the country. But press box system, okay, it's an easy installation, but the speakers are only 12, maybe 20 feet above people's heads if it's a two-story box. So one of the while it's an easy installation and not a lot of labor, we've got people, directly under speakers that are trying to reach all the way across the field. And we want to provide enough sound across the field so we can keep that audience engaged. But if we're firing right over the heads of the booster club and they're being exposed to 100 plus decibels, while we try to achieve 85 decibels on the other side of the field, that could be a consideration. So it's just physics at the end of the day. Easy install. Light poles, manufacturers, if it's new construction, the manufacturers know us. We've been doing sports sound forever, and a lot of them can equip their poles with mounting tabs to hook our included yokes onto for easy low-cost mounting of loudspeakers on the light poles. Some of these manufacturers don't want any other metal touching their poles. They'll actually void the warranty of the pole if any other metal touches it that did not come with that pole. And there's corrosion concerns, and this is also where we want to employ a professional engineer, especially on some of the newer LED lighting poles. I mean, lighting poles used to be huge. I mean, they used to be 24 inches in diameter and go up your 60, 90 feet. But with the advent and the higher affordability of LED lights now, these poles have gotten skinnier, and you really do want to have a professional engineer evaluate if that pole can handle the additional wind loading of the loudspeakers. It's not so much the loudspeaker weight, it's how much force it puts on that pole, when the storms come through. So very important. And then with the scoreboard systems, again, we could cover a whole lot. We can cover a whole lot of area, with 2 or maybe up 4 speakers, but we're projecting sound very long distances. Press box and light poles are generally considered a near field experience. You want everybody to hear it about the same. The wind's blowing, it's hot out and stuff. For the people in the direct path of the speakers, it sounds the same pretty much all the time. Start placing speakers on scoreboards though, well, that sound's traveling, perhaps 300 feet or 250 feet before it gets to the first listener, and Mother Nature is going to have her way with that sound, depending if it's hot, cold, which direction the wind is blowing. And it's also very hard to get that really, that upper high frequency information over those distances too. So if you want, a higher quality, perception of sound usually leads to speakers being closer to listeners. Also with the scoreboards, we can't really make the sound stop at the edge of the stadium. I think Todd is going to touch on this, but yeah, the sound, okay, we cover the home side, the away side, the field, but the sound keeps going. And the noise ordinances may allow that or they may not. So just a lot more considerations outdoors, but in the end, we want to engage our audience. Oh, and video, that's one I wanted to mention. If you have a video aspect, of your system, whether it's, in an end zone or, on a wall or something of that sort, display surfaces everywhere these days. If you want the video to kind of be in sync with the sound, having the speakers closer to the listeners. I mean, light, yeah, it travels fast. Sound comparatively, only about 1,000 feet a second for sound. So having a video scoreboard with great content on it, but the audio and video and placing the speakers on it, they're out of sync. It's going to be tough to draw your audience's attention to that and engage them, for an event or for, whatever that video piece is, if the sound is so far out of sync that it's just not making sense. So we generally really do lean towards, speakers closer to people to support any sort of video type reinforced systems.
Same examples from our design guide for baseball, softball fields. I'm not going to spend as much time on this, but same kind of idea. A lot of these ball fields we experience just, if it's a middle school or high school, maybe they want bare bones, but you still have to get the message across to your audience. So we have small devices, we have big devices. Again, what's the experience? What's our environment? What can we mount to? So those various things go into the equation, and we spit out ideas for that. And our design team for any of this kind of work will let you know what the results will be if you use this device or that device. And again, compromises that are made either way, either on your pocketbook or with the audience. Same thing with soccer fields. A lot more of these going up these days. It's becoming a much more popular sport here in America. So we are finding lots more going on in those. I've seen even ones that have big displays on the sides because it makes for an outdoor amphitheater for free if you already have the soccer ball field. So we like putting speakers around that. Kind of to Dave's point, you got to also worry about the sync issues, but still, it's generally not as bad as a football stadium with a display 400 feet away. Nonetheless, more ideas in the design guides for covering all of these kind of applications. Dave talked about the neighbors. Yeah, what you got?
So I was just going to ask Todd. So you mentioned the residential or the spillover into residential areas. It seems like that goes both ways. Like you might also be near a busy highway that's extremely loud. How is that handled in terms of ensuring that the sound gets to the people without blowing the neighbors out versus trying to get clear sound when you've got Interstate 95 going by?
Right. Yeah, and it's super important to think about that, because oftentimes people just think of, I need to cover the stands. That's all I'm worried about. But today's point, we can't stop sound. There's no magic wall that we can put up. So perhaps the desire is to put some speakers on a scoreboard, but now we know that the pattern's going to cover the neighbors that might be just beyond the tree line. So now we have to start thinking about, well, the back of the speakers needs to go to those people. And we're going to have to talk about a different place to put speakers than you, Mr. Customer, may have desired. And moreover, just the loudness of a highway, that now is your noise floor. You're going to have crowd noise coming into play as well. So not only is it placement, but of course, how much energy do I need to get out of these speakers? So we have to start picking larger devices. Well, now I've got more energy that could be spilling beyond the field. So as long as we manage expectations and at least have a dialogue about what's allowed in your neighborhood, then we can start making decisions, because you don't want what's happening in this picture to happen, yet it happens all the time. The more frustrating one is when we design a system and say put speakers here and there, and then someone goes and installs them somewhere else. then we get the phone call saying, hey, the neighbors are mad. And we find out, hey, the speakers weren't put where we wanted them to be. So now let's fix that. And oftentimes we see over-engineered systems, as it were. People put a lot of speakers into a place, and there's lots of volume coming from single locations, and we can get by with fewer devices, cover just where we need to cover, and stop annoying the neighbors. So it's very important to understand what is going on and what's the nature of the activity in those areas, because someone on their back porch might not want to be part of the game. They bought that house and didn't think about what halftime meant, but let's do our best to attend to them.
It sounds like too
containment is key.
That's also an argument in response to someone who says, well, I'm just going to do it myself, and they may actually purchase more than they need. Yeah. Where an AV expert might save them money by saying you don't actually need all those speakers.
It wasn't too long ago I had a bad experience with this. It was like, I'm glad they bought 8 speakers for their stands, but the better solution was 2. So I love selling stuff, but again, kind of what I said earlier, is let's not misapply our products, right? Sure. Maybe less is more.
And working with our integrators that know how to program our systems, especially our digital signal processors. We can limit the volume in these spaces to help with this containment. If you have a heavy-handed operator that just all the way up all the time, the old DJ thing. Well, we can build in governors, if you will, or limiters into the systems, and properly tuned, we can help ensure that you're meeting whatever sort of noise mandates there may be once we get a properly installed sound system too.
And to that point of limiting just the audience experience or the neighbor's experience, the same amplifiers with DSP will limit the system so that you're not blowing speakers. A very important thing when it comes to these, especially when you don't know who the operators are. Maybe someone's in a press box and has no idea what's going on the field. They love turning up the bass knob on the mixer. All those kind of things come into play time and time again. But with our amplifiers and the DSP built in, we define the limits of the speakers, so we can literally stop stupid from happening. There's accidents that happen, but then there's operators who just make mistakes and bad decisions. So do you want to protect? It's an insurance policy, but it's also protect the neighbor policy.
Especially when speakers can be 40, 50 feet up on a pole. That's not just get out the ladder and let's go fix it. So let's invest in the technology to get us that that 10 or 15 year ROI on the system, also by just helping protect it.
Yeah. So looking at actual installs, we talked about the kind of different positions of loudspeakers. But these are the kind of things you have to look for in your facility. What is available? And this is some of the projects we've done. You have nice big scoreboards, lots of money gets poured into those these days, but you also make money on those. So, advertising comes into play, and sometimes people don't want to see the loudspeakers because there is an aesthetic value to them. So anyway, we see lots of people making the custom boxes up top to hide the speakers, hopefully with transparent cloth in front of them. Distributing along the press box, you can see it there. There's a good number of speakers up there. So we have to start talking structural. What can we mount to? We want to talk to engineers about those kind of details, because we don't determine how I'm going to attach it to the surface. We say, we would like you to attach it to the surface here. Our liability stops there. Engineers take over after that. So we want to guide those conversations importantly. Never mind on poles. You can see that speaker. Dave, how much does an R2 weigh?
125 pounds with the yoke.
Yeah. And that's also got an arm coming off the pole. So it's a big device. It's going to catch lots of wind. And when you have high winds, you have lots of structural stress. So again, very important to cover these points, because that's a death device if things aren't attended to. up there. So never mind the acoustic properties and performance side of things, but there are safety issues. And hey, maybe life safety is important and you need to understand the message coming through that. So that's also something that we want to attend to depending on the facility. And to that visceral experience, people want highest output systems, all the low frequency you can ever want or get into a room. We love to scale too. We have lots of ability to get big, loud, low, and make for a musical, visceral experience while also getting the message of the game across. So the fan engagement, I mean, even in House of Worship, it's like how to get your audience into the message, to the experience. And honestly, subwoofers do a lot of that work, right? We have lots of requests for subwoofers. It's trickier to put them into situations, or at least into applications and jobs. You know, can you mount them on poles? Yeah, it's free air. You have to worry about how much energy you're just giving up. Can I put them under the stands? Those kind of things. But you know, we want to get the experience across, so we have to make decisions based upon, hey, where can we put speakers? How many should I put in a space? Where's the point of diminishing returns on how much sub can go in? That previous picture I showed of Campbell University, they just wanted more subs and more subs and more subs. You guys aren't going to get more out of this system. It's going to be too much. And indeed it was. So they ended up running, I think, half of the subs. They have spares. So, you know, there are reasons to have enough and maybe reasons to not have too much. But we can go big. So we were looking at R series, lots of things in that family. And to Dave's point, you see them all across the country and the world. It's a familiar kind of box, the bell shape. But we have your typical like performance speakers as well, our I series speakers, everything from a compact up to line array systems. And we make them indoor and outdoors. So the outdoor versions, we like our 15-year warranty on the R series. We do the same on our I series, and they're, you know, performance boxes designed to give you that visceral experience to kind of step up the musical performance when you want that full range attitude, rock and roll. And honestly, I also have people who say, I like the look of that box over an R series. So, you know, there's reasons to use one or the other acoustically, but there's also simply the aesthetic of a loudspeaker. So we get lots of things influencing those decisions. That guy on the bottom right there is a big beast. It's a large device that handles anything from a small environment that needs to manage some tricky acoustics, but that's also what we start using on scoreboard systems or arena projects where we need big sound from a distance. So it's a pretty complex device, but we love designing with it because it does tackle issues, right? We're application driven, so let's overcome and combat acoustic issues or just the experience that people want to get across. Dave, did you want to throw anything in?
No, I mean, I think you covered it pretty well there.
Yeah, no, kind of to my last point there, saving years, that's important. We want to tell you exactly what the system is going to do. We design to a continuous output of the system, and then there's peak output of a system. So you got to kind of watch where specs play around that. But we try to, well, we are on the honest side of things, but we know when we're going to hurt people. So we can kind of putting the governors in the system, the limiters in the system, or opening it wide up and letting people get as much gain as possible out of these things.
Yeah,
but
if you got an experienced operator, you know, that knows how to use the sound system as a tool and enhance those moments, you know, during an event. Yeah, you know, extremely effective to have that extra headroom available for those moments that happen during an event, and create those memories and great experiences for all attendees.
Yeah, and you know, the subs are doing the digesting of food. So how much can I put in there? How much is reasonable? But it's also a competitive thing. I want my room to sound better than the next one down the street or the next school. So not only do we want to beat them on the field, but we want to have that bigger experience and make their fans jealous when they come over and watch the away team. So lots of reasons to think about larger systems, or not maybe larger, but just a better experience with something like supported by the subwoofers. It can be that simple. So you've gone through all this, you realized you need a new system. We've walked through a space, you've kind of identified, like, I can't understand things, that speaker's broken, it's in the wrong place, my acoustics are nasty, whatever that might be. We've got all that data coming in, the site survey, as it were. Now you need to do something with that information. So what are you going to do with it? And how do I want to take it to the next step, which is actually getting a system? So we want to define the desired experience. Do you want that heavy energy thing? Do I just need voice to get across to a playground or on a ball field? I need to hear it first and third. Let's get an understanding of just the colloquial, how do I want this thing to sound? Can I use my existing speakers? Maybe they're all right. Maybe they just need to be deployed into a different position. But maybe they're tired. Maybe they've been worn out by the wrong amplifier and they've been pushed too hard and they're starting to get a little fuzzy. So let's talk about why we would want to use new ones, besides perhaps newer technology on the speaker design. Wiring, very important component. We need to get signal to these speakers. That image there, if you can't really read it, that's, all right, I want speakers on the away side. It's great to get speakers close to people. But my conduit path is now 300, 400 feet, probably not going to be able to go under the field unless it's all new construction. But we have to account for how much wire is going across there. And we like to influence the decisions about what type of wire, how thick that stuff should be. But even in a facility indoors, maybe my equipment room is really far away. So we have to, again, kind of design to what the infrastructure is, and wiring is a big component of that. So we also address that and start specifying that because we want our speakers to get exactly what the amplifiers are providing, so that likewise your audience gets it. Brushed on this before, just the safety of things. Again, we as a loudspeaker manufacturer have to indemnify ourselves from structural liability. So it's very important to have a professional engineer have input on these things. But it is something to attend to and be top of mind while designing or at least purchasing a system. Just always want to stress that you have to have somebody in the know and knowledgeable about these systems and weight loads, wind loads, everything like that comes into play.
And a regular maintenance cycle of checking the mounting, whether it's in a gym with a resonating ceiling because of the HVAC, or outdoors, somebody should be going to, physically check this stuff on a prescribed schedule to make sure nothing's coming loose, or the first guy, got it tight enough. We like to think everybody does it perfect the first time, but these aren't set and forget systems. Yeah, they're hard to get to, but the liability of not maintaining the mounting of these systems is pretty huge.
Yep. And Biamp has lots of tools. We have lots of speakers. We have over 400 separate SKUs for speakers. Not everyone's going to be used in a sports facility, but we have lots of tools. You as the end user don't have much time to figure all this stuff out. So we're here. We have design services, Dave's team, to take care of that kind of work, so you don't have to worry about all these different speakers. But we don't actually do the install. So we do have a network of qualified integrators. We work with lots of folks across the country. Or maybe you have your own company that already uses stuff. Let's work in conjunction with those outfits so that we know what they can do, what they should do, and they get as much information from us as possible, because it's always super important that what we think needs to happen, hopefully as close as possible, happens on the job site.
It's a team effort.
Yep, it is. I know we're kind of coming up on our hour here, so I'm just going to punch through a couple other things. We have resources on our webpage, so if you wanted to submit a design request, it's under our support section on biamp.com. That goes right to Dave's team. So end users, integrators, any customer is allowed to come onto our website and give us some information about your job. We walk you through what we need, and we get you a design, simply put. Site surveys, we talk about kind of walking and doing a generic site survey, but we have more resources there that will help you with measuring your space, things to pay attention to and actually take note of for us. And then we have lots of case studies. We've got them on the website. This was just a high school that needed some, controlled coverage and intelligibility. So our series went in there, some subs, again, it's just the experience that the customer wanted. So we had to match that while also tending to the space. That school loved what we did inside. So we went outside and did their stadium. So it's a typical stadium that you'd find thousands of across the country. You can see we like little poles put up there to get us some elevation for loudspeakers. So when we have that kind of input for the customer, it's lovely when they can accommodate to get speakers up where we want them. Anyway, additional structure that we love if someone can do, but we are at the mercy of what the structure is, right? Some of the big stuff again, South Dakota Dome. This has IV6, the white speakers that look really tiny up there, but they're big line arrays. Fun project, high energy, controlled output, the stuff line array gives us. This is in Chattanooga, our Tennessee Volunteers. 184 of our devices stretched around that place. It's a big stadium to do a single scoreboard location. To a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier, let's distribute speakers all around this place, give the fans a more even experience, get speakers closer to the audience. All that stuff comes into play. It's an hour.
All right. Well done, Todd. That about covers it. I was going to ask you, just kind of a wrap up of the talk, but I think you took care of that at the end, Todd. Todd and Dave, thank you so much for taking the time. I think it's great information to all of our audience. Please feel free to reach out to either Todd or Dave at the emails there on the screen. Thank you to Biamp for sponsoring today's conversation, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.